What's up, guys? Today I'm going to quickly go over some of the mid lane builds and kind of explain what you should be building and what I would build personally in mid for a lot of the heroes. And to start, we're just going to get straight into it. I don't want to waste too much time. I kind of want to keep this video around 15 minutes. So to start with Countess, I would typically go Obelisk most of the time. It just gives you a nice amount of burst and gives you some health in the lane, health regen. Whenever you stack this crest, to stack it you get health back from killing minions or like hitting enemy heroes, which could be really nice in the lane to give you a little bit of sustain. And then again, that burst and the power that you get late game can really allow you to just blow people up, which is kind of your job as an assassin. Next I go into Combustion. Again, same thing, it gives you some flat pen, some mana to stay in the lane, and it just lets you blow people up. It also helps you with your wave clear a little bit and gives you the ability to kind of look for rotations. So typically, that's usually my first item on Countess. Sometimes I'll go Megacosm first, but we'll get to that in a minute. Next I go Wraith Leggings. Again, it's just stacking the flat pen and stacking your ability to just one-shot somebody, allowing you to do more damage when they're below 40%, which usually when you play Countess you kind of want to like E, which is the wave, into the dash right click, and then you ult, and then the ult will typically get that extra damage increase. So Wraith Leggings is really good. Also gives you some mobility by giving you some movement speed and things like that to allow you to really kind of kite people around and use your assassin abilities to kind of outplay people. Next up we have Megacosm. This is kind of your tank killer. This allows you to hit your enemy tanks and do actual damage to them. Otherwise you kind of just, hit them like a wet noodle. Also gives you some mana and some cooldown, which can be really nice. Cooldown specifically allowing you to just recast more often. Allows you to just get more damage off. Really strong item specifically again against tanks. But also gives you a nice little burst if you hit two abilities back to back. That can help you chunk some squishies too. Next up, the last two items for most builds are kind of going to be pretty similar. You build Caustica, you kind of have to. It's the only percent damage magical item in the, percent pen magical item in the game. So you kind of are required to build this item on pretty much every single magical carry in the game, or magical, caster, whatever you want to call it. It's just a requirement. You have to get percent pen at some point. It allows you to hit tanks. Every character has base protection, so you kind of must build this. In my opinion, it is a 4th slot item. Sometimes you go 3rd, depending on if you're against like a really tanky team comp, like maybe like a Steel Jungle and like a Richter. But usually this is my 4th slot item. Very strong item. You must build this in every build. If you don't have this, you are trolling. Straight up, you are trolling if you don't build Caustica at some point in your build. Next up, we have Oblivion Crown. Typically the last item in almost every single build. It's just your highest spike item. It gives you percent power increase, then gives you the ability to just take 10% of somebody's HP at some point. And then deal extra damage. So it's really, really strong against people, and specifically tanks. Again, you take like 10% of their current HP, as well as increasing your damage. It's just an insanely strong item. These last two items aren't going to change really on almost any build. They're very strong. Some of the other items that you could be building on Countess could be like Tainted Scepter, perhaps. Let's say you're against some anti-heal, you can get, let's say you go like Combustion into Megacosm, you can cut the Wraith Leggings and go Tainted Scepter if you need anti-heal. Let's say you're into like a Narbash or something like that. Alternative options that you could go for Countess would be like Soul Bearer. You can go Soul Bearer instead of Obelisk. It gives you a little bit more mana sustain. However, you do get the lifesteal and the shield if you need it in the specific matchups. You can also go Epoch on Countess. This is specifically for like the Howitzer matchup. If Howitzer knocks you back and then he ults you, you're just kind of dead. So usually this allows you to just kind of sustain his ult, or if you're against a really heavy dive comp, or something like a Morigesh, where they might try to Morigesh ult you when you're low HP, something like that. Epoch can really come in handy by just giving you that little stasis to kind of be invulnerable for a little bit. So just something to think about when you're playing. Typically though, I almost always go Obelisk, unless again those specific matchups such as a Howitzer or Morigesh. Next, we're going to go into the Fae. I guess we'll do Dekker too, I guess. I'll do Dekker as well. Might as well. She can be played mid. If you play her mid, I always go Obelisk. There is no reason to go anything else. Even if you're against like a Morigesh or a Howitzer, you can just stun the Howitzer, you can stun the Morigesh out of her ult, things like that. You can also use your mobility, using your jump. You shouldn't be in a position to really get killed by something like that in most games. But I almost always go Obelisk, and unless I'm like having fun, then I might throw in like a Time Flux. But on Dekker, I would always go Obelisk usually. First item on Dekker, I almost always go Megacosm. She's a cooldown heavy character, so having the extra cooldown for Megacosm early feels really nice. Also, helps the wave clear a little bit. You get a little dot damage, able to hit tanks, set up for ganks really well. She's really good at setting up ganks, so having your cooldowns ready for that, also really impactful. Time Warp is usually my second item on her. She's really, again, a cooldown character. Time Warp allows you to just cast more often. The more stuns you're throwing out, the more damage you're throwing out, the more Megacosm procs you're getting off, and just the better she feels in general. So Time Warp is typically my second item on Dekker mid. Third, I'll just go the Wraith leggings. Again, allows you to full combo people. You get a little bit of movement speed, allows you to get mobility. Just a really strong item. You're going to see this in a lot of builds as well. This is typically my Dekker build though. Next up we have the Fae. Usually on the Fae it looks pretty similar to that, although the only difference, I go Wraith leggings second instead of third. She's a low mobility character, doesn't really have a dash or anything like that. Wraith leggings allows you to be really oppressive with your E and just kind of kite around your right click and your vines that you throw on the ground that apply slows. Time Warp just lets you cast more often, get your abilities up, and you just kind of slam people. You're just trying to look to proc Megacosm a lot of the time with this character, so just can't like spamming those cooldowns, getting your cooldowns more often, and just throwing abilities out. Even if you're not doing a lot, just start proccing Megacosm on the tanks. You know, you can just, you're one of the only mid laners that can actually like blow up a tank with your E because you can just throw it every 2 seconds. So don't be scared to just hit tanks, especially on the Fae. Now we go to Gadget. Gadget's kind of similar. The only difference being I would probably just go the time warp in the second slot. You can debate. Sometimes you go like a little bit of a different build where you go, there's a second build. It's called the shield build, effectively. This is specifically for like the Gideon matchup or the Fae matchup, which allows you to basically buy a true silver shield. And then whenever they ult you, you just ult their ult and counter. And then you no longer have to worry about getting pulled or Gideon ulted, and then you kind of are really tanky because True Silver also gives you a shield, Soul Bearer gives you a second shield, and then Gadget passive is the third shield. So you basically have 3 shields that the enemy team has to go through, and it can make you really tanky. So this is something that I would consider into specific matchups, such as Gideon or the Fae specifically, as well as if you're against a really heavy dive comp where they're just trying to kill you and you're the goal. Like the goal for them to win the game is to kill you. You can try this a little bit of a tankier build. The one thing I would be worried about with this build is that it is a little bit more of a late game build. So I would be careful with this build if you're into like a really high pressure lane like Belica. The other thing I would say, if you're building a Zerkor, when you do this build, you only get the tier 2 and then you sit on that for a while. You don't finish this until you finish the rest of your build. So you get Alchemical Rod, which is the stacking component of a Zerkor, and then until your entire build is finished, you don't come back and finish it for a Zerkor. You just kind of sit on that tier 2 for the longest time, and then you come back and finish it late game. But that's like, again, specific matchups. Typically, I go this top build. It's a little bit more early game focused, so you don't get kind of bullied as hard. But this bottom build can be really strong into specific matchups. Next up, we have Gideon. This build is a little similar, although usually I go Tainted Scepter in the third slot and don't go the Time Warp. This allows you to blow people up and really just kind of abuse people. I also go Soul Bearer usually. Epoch will cancel your ult. Typically, the way you want to play Gideon is you want to, flash into the enemy backline, pop your ultimate, use Soul Bearer during your ultimate to get lifesteal, and then you get a shield, so you don't get hit as hard, and then you gen up a little bit, and you can really get your ult off to do some serious damage. So usually you go Soul Bearer on Gideon. Quick caveat is True Silver Bracelet. Sometimes you can go True Silver instead of Tainted Scepter, depending on the game that you're in. If you're worried about them having like a Dekker stun or something that can cancel your ult, maybe a Richter Hook, Rampage Rock, things like that, you can put a True Silver in your build, third item, really strong. It basically gives you a shield when you ult that makes you CC immune, so you can't be canceled out of it. The way you use this, again, when you pop your Soul Bearer, you want to make sure that you ult first to get the True Silver shield, and then use your Soul Bearer on top of that. This requires them to go through the Soul Bearer shield before they can take out the CC immunity from the True Silver Bracelet shield. So this allows you to basically get an extra shielded protection on the CC immunity, pretty much guaranteeing that you're going to get a full channeled ult off. So that's just something to think about on Gideon, and that's usually into very specific games, but it is worth mentioning in my opinion. Next up we have Howitzer. Howitzer, I usually go Epoch on. You can go Obelisk though. Obelisk can also be really strong, as well as Oathkeeper. Both of these in conjunction can really make you, like, you boop somebody with the E, you throw a rocket, and then you auto attack with Oathkeeper and Obelisk, and you can absolutely obliterate somebody with that auto attack. It can hit for like 1,000 due to Howitzer passive. So something to consider if you want to go a build like that. But normally I go something pretty similar to the Countess build, where you can go Combustion in the first slot into Wraith leggings for the double flat pen. You're kind of a lane bully, so you really want that flat pen to bully out the other mid laner. Then you get Megacosm so you can kill tanks, and then the last two items are pretty similar. Again, these are pretty much the same in every single mage build. They're not really negotiable. You kind of have to get them as well as Megacosm. Megacosm you can kind of move around a little bit though, unlike Kafka and Oblivion Crown. Something else that you can do on Howitzer is Megacosm into Wraith leggings. You can then get Time Warp. You can also go Time Warp second. He's a little bit flexible in this regard. Other mids, not so much, but he is a little bit flexible in when you can or can't get Wraith leggings. He doesn't really require it, so even if you want to, you could go something like this and then get a Tainted Scepter in here if you need anti-heal. Also could be really useful. He is kind of just a flexible pick. He has a lot of options, but typically you're going to get Megacosm, you're going to get Caustica, you're going to get Oblivion Crown, you're going to get either Wraith leggings or Tainted Scepter, and then you can go Time Warp or Combustion depending on the game. And then if you want to have a little bit of fun, throw an Obelisk and an Oathkeeper in there somewhere like this, and you can have a lot of fun just blowing people up with a single auto attack. Next up we have Iggy. Iggy he's new, so people aren't really like too used to playing him. But so far what I've found to work the best is something like this. Probably the only character that I would actually build Dreambinder on. You go Epoch just to be a little bit more survivable. You get the stun, and then Megacosm, self-explanatory, it's your tank shredder. He has a lot of dot damage. He has a lot of things that just kind of proc Megacosm, especially from a distance and onto multiple people, so it's really easy to get a lot of value out of. Wraith leggings, if you're hitting a lot of people, you're getting the movement speed often. You can really run around the map and wreak some havoc. Dreambinder, it makes it a little bit harder for people to chase you. It just applies a slow on your abilities. So you throw your right click out, it applies a slow. Your turrets auto attack, it applies a slow. Your ult applies a slow. It just really allows you to kite people around and run around your turrets and kind of bait people around. It also gives you a nice amount of HP and tenacity, which allows you to be a little bit more survivable, especially as a character without any mobility. And then Kafka, Oblivion Crown, again, you're going to build these in every single mage build. It's just a requirement, unfortunately. Belica. Belica's a little bit interesting. I tend to build her with Megacosm, Wraith Leggings, Tainted Scepter, similar to the Gideon build. But some people do prefer to go the Countess route, where you go Combustion into Wraith Leggings into Megacosm. I think this build's a little bit better early game, but I think Tainted Scepter does allow you to blow people up a little bit better late game, just because Combustion kind of does fall off a little bit in the late game, because it doesn't scale as well as something like Tainted Scepter does. As well as anti-heal is really strong in the meta. Currently there's a lot of healing, a lot of Unbroken Wills and things like that, and a lot of other things that heal. So I think Tainted Scepter is a really strong item right now, which is why I tend to prefer this build most of the time. Then we'll move over to Morigesh. Morigesh is very similar to the Fae, pretty much almost the exact same build. The only thing I would say is you could maybe go Spirit of Emir instead of Time Warp if you want to, just because it kind of benefits a little bit more from your E, as well as your, just the ability to move around faster because it gives you some movement speed. So you could debate with this one, or like I was saying, Time Warp. Either one in this third slot can be useful. Try out Emir, see if you like it. If not, go Time Warp and just try to put out as much damage as you can. Throw more right clicks, throw more ultimates, throw more Qs out. Just try to get as much value out of the cooldown as you can. That's typically my build on Morigesh. I don't really play Morigesh that much. I don't think she's particularly that good. I would not really recommend playing Morigesh. A little bit bad right now, but if you're into it, that's what I would typically build on her. Lastly, we have Shinbi. Shinbi is kind of an interesting character right now. I think she has the potential to be incredibly strong in the current meta. And typically, this is what I would build on her most of the time. It is Obelisk into this Megacosm into an Oathkeeper. This allows you to basically just get a super auto attack with Obelisk and Oathkeeper. Again, kind of like what we were talking about with Howitzer, where it just allows you to just blow somebody up on an auto attack. You kind of dash in, which procs your Oathkeeper, pop your Obelisk, auto attack, blow somebody up, and then you use your second dash to get on out of there. And it can be really strong. Spirit of Emir, again, gives you some movement speed, gives you some lifesteal. It can be really nice, especially on Shinbi. Shinbi also has a very big mana issue, so this allows her to kind of regen a little bit more mana. Alternative options, again, you could go Time Warp, you could go Wraith Leggings, you can still go this bursty build, where you just kind of spam cooldowns and just kind of proc your Q on people. I would still always go Obelisk, though. It's just her best item, arguably. One thing about Shinbi though, I would probably refrain playing her from mid. Same thing with Countess, just because they're kind of melee characters. They can really get bullied out, and if you don't know what you're doing, you're not going to have a fun time. You're probably going to be a little bit behind, and you're just not going to really have the impact that you want to have. So Shinbi and Countess, while the builds don't change, I would typically play them in jungle. Just something that I thought I should say, just because I don't want people playing, Countess and Shinbi, and then just not having a good time because they are playing a melee into a Howitzer, who's a range character that just kind of bullies you out a little bit. So just be careful playing those two picks. They are more traditionally junglers in Pred, whereas in original Paragon, I'm pretty sure they were a little bit more of a mid laner. Lastly, I'm going to do Wraith. The reason I'm going to do Wraith and not any of the other ADCs is because I think Wraith is primarily a mid laner, whereas some of these other mid laners that are ADCs, such as Twin Blast, are more traditionally ADCs, but they can be played in mid. Wraith, I think, is 100% a mid laner, and there's not really any other option for him. I think his carry is pretty weak, but his mid is actually really strong. Debatably the strongest mid laner in the game right now. First item I would go is Witchstalker. Some people like Ortis. I'm personally a Witchstalker enjoyer. I like having a cleanse. Just makes it a little bit harder for you to get locked down. A lot of people don't know that you can actually use this for damage too. You can pop this, so then it makes your right click do an extra 4% of their max HP. So if somebody's a little bit, your right click might not kill them, you can pop this and make your right click do enough damage to kill them. Some people do like Ortis. They like the movement speed. They like the little bit of power and the stacking. Personally, I haven't found a lot of success with it, but I am also just bad at using it correctly. So there is value in it. I just don't personally get value from it. First actual item I would go would be Mind Razor. This basically just allows you to clear. It gives you a lot of mana and power. Wraith is really mana hungry, and he struggles to clear. This kind of solves both issues. And then once you kind of get this item, you're really kind of spiking over the other mid laners, since they're usually a little bit slower on their build. Wraith being a physical character, he kind of gets online slightly faster. Then I like to go Pain Weaver. Wraith is really good at rotating. This also gives him flat pen, which allows him to, again, bully the other mid laner, who's usually pretty squishy. But the movement speed and the pen that you get is just really strong. The movement speed specifically allows you to rotate with Wraith's E, allowing you to get a lot of value and potentially get some picks with his rewind and his burst damage, and it can be really strong. Also gives you a lot of survivability because you get movement speed with your E. You kind of stack that movement speed with Pain Weaver. It makes it really hard for you to gank, especially if the person ganking you has to use their mobility or doesn't have the ability to chase you because they don't have mobility. Third, I like to go Omen. This basically just gives you a ability reset off your next auto attack after you move a certain amount of distance. It then gives you kind of a bursty auto attack. So usually what you do on Wraith is you Q, you right click and do an auto attack, cancel, and then that resets your Q again, so then you can Q and then you can right click 2 more times, provided that you hit them all. This allows you to get a lot of damage off in team fights and really allows you to kind of run at people. If you have 3 items, you can kind of catch somebody 1v1, pop your, run up to them with your invis, be as close as possible, make sure you hit your abilities, pop your Q, pop your right click, and then you just kind of Omen reset and you just do it again. And there's not really much people can do about it other than just not get hit, I guess, by the right click. But if you're on point as Wraith, you should just be dominating people with this kind of build. Fourthly, you get Perforator. It's a percent pen option. As we're talking about on mages, you are required to get a percent pen option just so that you can get through, at the very least, the base protections that some of these other characters have, as well as the armor that they might build. So Perforator, 4th item. Very, very strong. It also applies a slow on your other abilities, which isn't super relevant to Wraith, but it can be nice to kind of get a little slow on the right click to allow you to chase, especially on the third. If you Q, which applies a slow, your right click then applies a slow, then your second right click can also apply a slow. So it can kind of make it a little bit easier to hit your abilities as well. But just a generally really good item. The pen, very strong. All of these items give cooldown, which is really important to Wraith. A lot of people build Vanquisher on them. Personally, I don't really like it just because it doesn't give you cooldown, but it does give you a little bit more burst and can help you kill tanks sometimes. I might get it late game if I'm against a super tanky comp, but typically I like to go Infernum. Infernum, another cooldown item, gives you more mana, which stacks power with your Mind Razor, which makes it really nice. And then basically every 3 times you deal damage to somebody, it just applies a little dot to them and does burn based on your physical power, and it's a lot of damage, especially in team fights. If you pop your Q on somebody and then you pop a right click, the Q actually hits twice, which allows your first right click to actually proc Infernum, which allows you to really do some damage to somebody and can really catch people off guard, as well as just being just a solid item. Also helps your DPS on objectives specifically, which is something Wraith struggles with, hitting like Orb Prime or hitting Fangtooth. Infernum really helps you take down these objectives late game, and it's just a really good item. But that's all for the mid laners. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this type of video. I might do this type of video for every other role as well, like ADC, jungle, support, solo lane. Let me know if you guys would enjoy that, and hope everybody has a good rest of their day. Thank you for watching.